My parents hid that my boyfriend was cheating on me with my sister to save their reputation. Hey everyone, Daphne here. I guess I never really thought I'd be the one to air my dirty laundry online, but here I am, sitting in my half-empty apartment at 2 a.m., needing to tell someone, anyone, about the avalanche that just tore through my life. You see, I used to think I had it pretty much together: a decent job, a loving partner, and a family that, while not perfect, I believed was solid enough. But as it turns out, I was living in a beautifully curated illusion. It all started unraveling a few weeks ago with a phone call from a family friend, Laura. She's the kind who'd tell you if your coat was unbuttoned, so when she said she thought she saw Ben, my partner of 3 years, getting a little too cozy with my sister Emily at a local bar, it felt like a punch to the gut. Not just because of what it implied, but because it dredged up a sea of trust issues I thought I'd sailed past long ago. Now, I'm not one to jump to conclusions without the facts, but that call sparked a chain reaction. I had to know the truth, but every step I took to uncover it only led me deeper into a maze of lies, betrayal, and scandal, both at home and at my job. Funny how when one part of your life starts to crumble, everything else likes to join in, right? So, grab your popcorn, or maybe a box of tissues, and buckle up. This is the story of how my seemingly stable life spiraled into chaos, leaving me questioning just about everything and everyone I've ever trusted. The day after Laura's call was a blur. My mind raced with every possible explanation, each more unsettling than the last. I knew I had to confront Ben, but how do you approach someone you love with accusations like that? Still, the seed of doubt had been planted, and there was no going back. I waited for Ben to come home that evening, rehearsing what I might say 100 times over. When he finally walked through the door, his smile fell away the moment he saw my expression. "What's wrong?" he asked, setting down his bag with a concerned look. "Ben, we need to talk. It's important," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. I led him to the living room, and we both sat, an awkward tension hanging between us. "Laura called me yesterday. She said she saw you at the bar with Emily, and it seemed intimate." There, I had said it. Ben's face changed then. It wasn't the outright denial I'd braced for, it was something more elusive, more evasive. "Daphne, you know how close I am with your sister. We were just having a drink, catching up. You trust me, don't you?" His question stung, mingled with the guilt of my suspicions and the fear that they might be true. "I want to trust you, Ben. I really do. But something about this feels off. Can you honestly tell me there's nothing going on?" Ben sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Honestly, yes. There's nothing going on. I love you, Daphne. Don't let some misunderstanding come between us." I wanted to believe him, to laugh it off as just another silly misunderstanding. But the doubt lingered, gnawing at me. I nodded, more to end the conversation than from any conviction, and we spent the rest of the night in a strained silence. The next day, I decided I needed another perspective, the source of my unease, Emily. I met her for coffee, a casual setting for a not-so-casual conversation. As soon as we sat down, the air between us was charged with an unspoken tension. "Em, I have to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me," I began, my hands wrapped tightly around my coffee cup. "Were you and Ben at the bar the other night?" Emily's face went pale, her eyes widening slightly. She hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, we were." Something in her demeanor shifted, and my heart sank. Did something happen? Something that shouldn't have? There was a long pause, the kind that fills up with 1,000 unspoken words, before she finally whispered, "Yes." Her confession hit me like a cold wave. It was a mistake, Daphne. It meant nothing. It just happened. The simplicity of her confession did nothing to soothe the sting. Betrayal from my partner was one thing, but from Emily too? It was too much. "How could you?" I managed to say through a tight throat, my emotions swirling into a storm of anger, hurt, and disbelief. She reached out, trying to touch my hand, but I pulled away. "I'm so sorry, Daphne. I never meant to hurt you." But the damage was done. I stood up, my mind racing, my heart breaking. "I need some space, Emily. Please." As I walked away, the weight of her betrayal heavy on my shoulders, I realized that confronting the truth was only the beginning. The fallout was going to be much, much worse. The days following my conversations with Ben and Emily were some of the loneliest I'd ever experienced. The house felt colder, the silences longer, and every glance shared between any of us seemed loaded with unsaid accusations or pity. I knew I couldn't keep the turmoil to myself any longer. It was time to bring everything into the open, though I dreaded the fallout that was sure to follow. I decided to call a family dinner under the guise of needing to be together, but my real motive was to confront the broader issues head-on. As everyone gathered around the table, the familiar faces of my parents and siblings now seemed strangely alien. The aroma of Mom's baked lasagna, usually a comforting staple, did little to ease the tension. After a few minutes of awkward small talk and clinking cutlery, I couldn't stand the pretense any longer. "We need to address the elephant in the room," I announced, putting down my fork. The room fell silent, all eyes on me. "I know about Emily and Ben," I continued, my voice firm despite the shaking of my hands. My parents exchanged worried glances, while Emily looked down at her plate, her face a mask of guilt. Dad was the first to speak, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "Daphne, we were hoping to spare you the additional stress." "Spare me?" I interrupted, my voice rising in disbelief. "By keeping me in the dark about something this important?" Mom reached out, her hand trembling slightly as she touched mine. "We thought it was a minor slip, a one-time mistake. We didn't want to stir up trouble if it wasn't necessary." The revelation that they knew and chose silence over honesty was a new blow, almost harder to bear than the initial betrayal. "So, you all decided to just pretend everything was fine? What about me? Don't I deserve the truth?" The table was silent, the only sound the ticking of the wall clock, marking the seconds of uncomfortable truth hanging between us. Tom, my younger brother, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke up. "It's not just about you, Daphne. Think about what a scandal could do to our family's reputation. Sometimes it's better to just let things go." I stared at him, incredulous. "Let things go? My relationship is falling apart because of this, Tom. How can you say that?" "It's just how things are done, Daphne. It's how we keep the peace," he replied, his voice cold and detached. The realization that my family, the people I trusted most, prioritized appearances over my well-being was a bitter pill to swallow. I stood up, pushing my chair back with a scrape that echoed through the tense silence. If that's how we handle things, then maybe I need to reconsider where I stand in this family. I left them at the table, their faces a mix of shock and sadness, but no one stopped me. That night, as I lay in bed, the walls of my room felt like they were closing in on me. The isolation was palpable, suffocating. It wasn't just the betrayal or the lies, it was the profound sense of abandonment by those I held dearest. As the days passed, the initial shock gave way to a deep, simmering resentment. My attempts to reach out and understand were met with avoidance or empty platitudes about family and forgiveness. But the trust that once bound us together had frayed, perhaps irreparably. The foundation of my life felt unstable, and I knew that whatever came next, my relationships with Ben, Emily, and even my parents would never be the same again. The cracks were too deep, the secrets too dark, and the path to reconciliation seemed shrouded in a fog of hurt and misunderstanding. As the rifts within my family deepened, my professional life began to mirror the chaos at home. Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, the repercussions of the data manipulation accusations at work escalated. My boss called me into his office one grim Monday morning, his face somber. "Daphne, the investigation has picked up pace, and there are some serious allegations against you. I need to know I can trust you." Standing in his office, feeling the weight of his gaze, I realized how isolated I had become. "I've done nothing wrong," I replied, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "You know my work ethic. I've always upheld the highest standards." He nodded slowly, seemingly more out of obligation than agreement. "I want to believe you, Daphne, but I need more than just your word. There's evidence suggesting otherwise, and it's compelling." The meeting ended with a heavy heart, and I returned to my desk feeling like a pariah. Whispers followed me. Colleagues I once considered friends now hesitated to make eye contact. The professional reputation I had built over years was crumbling around me, all based on what I knew to be false accusations orchestrated by my envious colleague, Mike. Determined to clear my name, I started my own sleuthing to uncover how the data could have been manipulated, and by whom. Late nights at the office became my norm, poring over logs and audit trails. One evening, as I dug through emails and server records, I stumbled upon a trail of deleted files that had been cleverly hidden in the system, a trail that led back to Mike. Armed with this information, I confronted him the next day in the break room, away from the prying eyes and ears of our co-workers. "Why, Mike? What did you hope to gain from this?" Mike's face, usually smug and confident, faltered as he met my gaze. I needed to secure the promotion. It was nothing personal, Daphne. You were just in the way. The audacity of his admission was almost too much to bear. You're ruining my life over a job title? I hissed, aware of how loud my voice had become. I didn't think it would go this far, he muttered, looking away. The conversation ended with me storming out, a mix of anger and despair fueling my stride. With this new evidence, I approached HR, hopeful for vindication. However, the process was slow, and the skepticism was palpable. The damage to my credibility seemed irreversible, and with each passing day, my standing in the company deteriorated further. Meanwhile, at home, things were no better. Attempts to reconcile with my family were met with cold shoulders or empty promises. Emily and Ben had formed a united front, positioning me as the unstable one, too embroiled in her own problems to see reason. Even my parents, who I hoped would see sense, seemed more concerned about quelling family drama than addressing the roots of our issues. As my professional and personal lives spiraled out of control, I felt a profound sense of despair. The two pillars of my existence, my career and my family, were both faltering under the weight of deceit and betrayal. Each day became a test of endurance, a battle to find some semblance of the person I used to be before everything fell apart. But with each setback, that version of me seemed further and further away, leaving behind a shell of the confident, happy woman I once was. As the weeks dragged on, the strain of my dual crises wore me down. I was exhausted, functioning on a cocktail of adrenaline and anxiety, which fueled my relentless drive to fix what could be fixed. In my heart, there was a flicker of hope that resolution on one front might help mend the other. First, I focused on clearing my name at work. Armed with the evidence I had gathered against Mike, I presented my case to HR with as much composure as I could muster. The meeting was long and fraught with detailed explanations and document reviews. HR promised a thorough investigation into my findings, but the wheels of corporate justice turned slowly, and every day without resolution chipped away at my resolve. At home, I attempted to bridge the gaps with my family. I invited Emily out for a walk, hoping that a neutral setting might soften our conversation. It was a crisp Saturday morning. The park was lush and vibrant, a stark contrast to the tension between us. Emily, I don't know if we can ever go back to how things were, but I'm willing to try if you are, I said, watching a pair of squirrels dart across our path. She kept her gaze on the ground, her voice low. Daphne, I'm sorry for everything. I never wanted to hurt you. I just got swept up. Her apology was sincere, but the betrayal was too deep, the wound too fresh. I appreciate your apology, Emily, but it's going to take time. A lot of it, I replied, the part of me still aching for my little sister nodding in agreement. Our conversation ended with an awkward hug, the kind where neither person really commits to the embrace. It was a start, but the road to recovery seemed overwhelmingly long. With my family and work situation still in flux, I sought solace in therapy, a space that became my sanctuary. My therapist, Dr. Adler, helped me navigate my feelings of betrayal and mistrust. You're dealing with significant breaches of trust in key relationships, Daphne. It's natural to feel unmoored. What's important is how you rebuild from here, she advised during one of our sessions. Her words often echoed in my mind, a reminder that despite the chaos, there was a path forward. But as days turned into weeks, and then into months, with slow progress on both fronts, despair often clouded that path. Eventually, the investigation at work concluded. HR called me into a final meeting, where I was exonerated of all charges related to the data manipulation. Mike was put on administrative leave pending further investigation. While I felt a momentary relief, the victory was hollow. My reputation had suffered, relationships at work were strained, and the sense of belonging I once felt was gone. At home, the situation was similarly unresolved. My attempts to reconnect with Ben and my parents were met with polite indifference. They seemed more concerned with maintaining a facade of normality than addressing the underlying issues. Emily and I occasionally met for coffee, a ritual that felt more like a checkbox exercise than genuine reconciliation. As the year drew to a close, I found myself at a crossroads. The professional vindication had not brought the peace I hoped for, and the family I fought so hard to keep together seemed further apart than ever. The realization that I might never fully regain what was lost, trust, love, a sense of belonging, was sobering. In this labyrinth of personal and professional turmoil, I strove for resolution, but it seemed that the more I pushed, the more elusive it became. The ideal of a harmonious life, once so vivid and attainable, now felt like a mirage, always just out of reach. With the new year came a brittle sort of clarity. My name had been cleared at work, but the environment remained frosty and unwelcoming. Despite my exoneration, the lingering glances and hushed conversations persisted, a constant reminder of the ordeal. I realized that although I could return to my desk every day, I might never escape the shadow of suspicion that the scandal cast over me. Feeling increasingly alienated, I turned my focus back to my family, holding on to a thin thread of hope that reconciliation might still be possible there. Yet, as I tried to reconnect and rebuild the bridges that had been burned, I was met with polite nods and hollow smiles. It seemed that my family, much like my colleagues, preferred to sweep past grievances under the rug rather than address them openly. The facade of normalcy was more comfortable for them, more convenient than the messy process of healing. I made one last attempt to mend things with Ben. I invited him for a walk, much like I had with Emily, hoping that away from the prying eyes of our mutual social circles, we might find a moment of honesty and vulnerability. "Ben, I still care about you," I confessed as we walked through the park, a cold breeze tugging at our coats. "I know things went terribly wrong, but I thought maybe we could start over somehow." Ben stopped walking and turned to face me, his expression unreadable. After a long pause, he sighed. "Daphne, too much has happened. I'm sorry, but I just can't see a way back for us." His words, though gentle, felt like a door closing, slowly and irrevocably. Heartbroken but needing to respect his decision, I nodded silently. We parted ways at the park's edge, the finality of the moment settling around me like the winter chill. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into my work, trying to salvage some aspect of my life. However, the sense of alienation was palpable, and my achievements felt increasingly empty. I was clearing my desk one evening when I found an old photo of a family holiday, a reminder of happier times. The contrast between that bright, laughing group and the strained faces at recent family gatherings was stark. Feeling a surge of despair, I made a decision. I called a family meeting, much like the one where I had first confronted the issues tearing us apart. This time, however, the atmosphere was different. I wasn't there to seek answers or fight for reconciliation. I was there to say goodbye. I've realized that sometimes, no matter how hard you try, some things can't be fixed, I told the gathered family. I need to find a place where I feel valued and understood, and unfortunately, it's not here. My voice was calm, but carried an undercurrent of deep sadness. My parents protested, their expressions a mix of confusion and distress, and even Emily's eyes filled with tears. "Daphne, please don't do this," she pleaded. "I have to, Em. For my own sanity," I replied, my decision firm despite the pain it caused both her and me. Leaving the family home that evening felt like stepping off a cliff. The familiar surroundings faded into the background, and ahead was only uncertainty. I moved to a new city, leaving behind my job, my partner, and my family, carrying with me the lessons of trust betrayed and the harsh reality of unconditional love that came with conditions after all. In my new environment, I started over. Yet, despite new beginnings and new faces, the scars remained. I had escaped the situation, but I hadn't escaped the memories or the pain. As I built a new life, the solitude was a constant companion, a reminder of everything and everyone I had lost. The journey forward was mine alone, a path marked by the bitter realization that sometimes, to save yourself, you must leave behind everything else. I've come to understand that the end of my story wasn't written by the family I left behind or the colleagues who doubted me. It was written by me in every choice I made to seek truth over comfort, integrity over acceptance. Yet, the cost of those choices was higher than I ever anticipated. I lost the familiar warmth of family gatherings, the easy camaraderie of old friendships, and a love that I once thought would withstand any storm. My new life is a landscape of professional challenges and personal explorations, marked by successes that are solely my own. Yet, the victories are bittersweet, as they are celebrated without the people who were once my world. I've made acquaintances, perhaps even friends, but the shadows of past betrayals make it hard to let anyone get too close. The lessons of my past are etched deeply into who I am now. Trust, once given freely and abundantly, is now doled out sparingly and warily. Love, once bright and consuming, is now cautious and reserved. Family, once my anchor, has become a concept I approach with a mix of longing and apprehension. Sometimes, I wonder if I could have done things differently. Could I have been more forgiving, less principled? Would the outcome have been any different? These questions linger, unanswered, in the back of my mind, fueling a continuous cycle of what-ifs and if-onlys. As I pen this final entry from my high-rise view, Looking out over a city that doesn't yet feel like home, I realize this is not just the conclusion of a tumultuous chapter, but the beginning of another. This new chapter is one of self-discovery, of building resilience, and learning to find joy in solitude. I share my story not to evoke sympathy or to cast blame, but to offer a mirror to those who find themselves in similar battles, whether within their families, their relationships, or within themselves. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that the hardest battles often lead to the greatest revelations about our strength and spirit. And so, while the ending of my story may not be the happy one I had envisioned, it is one that I accept with a heavy but hopeful heart. For in every ending, there is also a beginning, and the promise of new possibilities, even if they must be pursued alone.